Deion Sanders pitched to become Florida's head coach and leave Colorado football behind. The Right Way Network's Steve Rivera believes we should expect Deion Sanders to leave the Colorado football behind in 2025 to become the head coach of the Florida Gators. Yes, expect. One huge option could be in the SEC, Rivera prefaced before saying, a homecoming of sorts for college and NFL royalty. In Gainesville, at the University of Florida, Sanders would be the superstar name with D1 credentials to resurrect a fading dynasty in the Gators. The clock is ticking on Billy Napier and time is not on his side. With Deion Sanders primed to move on to bigger and better in a place that is already home, expect him in the swamp come the 2025 season. Where to begin? Deion Sanders leaving Colorado football for Florida in 2025 is a laughable prospect. A homecoming of sorts for Sanders wouldn't be at Florida considering he was a Florida State Seminole during his playing days in college. Granted, Sanders isn't a proud Nole and made a point to proclaim that he's a Talladega College alum. It's a well-known secret that Coach Prime and FSU don't see eye to eye. But again, UF isn't a homecoming even from a distance perspective. Sanders' hometown, Fort Myers, is a 4-hour drive to Gainesville. And again, while Sanders doesn't bleed garnet, gold, white, and black, there has to be some part of him that naturally hates the rival Gators. Oh, and Cormani McClain, one of Sanders' biggest headaches in 2023, just committed to Florida. Sanders has repeatedly stated his desire to remain in Boulder for 5 to 10 years, leaving a program that has catered to his every desire, from hiring Warren Sapp despite his controversial past to even giving him his own CU course. For an SEC job that is losing its luster every year as the conference gets stronger just isn't in the cards in 2025. Deion Sanders will push for star Colorado football son to win Heisman, says one anonymous coach. One anonymous Pac-12 coach believes Deion Sanders will make a concerted push for his son, Shedeur Sanders, to win the first Heisman Trophy for the Colorado football program since Rashaan Ahmad Salam. He's an NFL guy, the coach told The Athletic's Bruce Feldman. Is he the first pick of the draft? I don't know, but I think he's a real dude. I think he throws it well. He's accurate. I think he's a first-round draft pick. I think Deion's going to try to win Shedeur the Heisman. I think they'll be good. They have good witty outs. Their O-line will be better. I think they'll be way better and they'll have a good year. Well, yeah. Coach Prime elevated Pat Shurmur to the full-time offensive coordinator position specifically to get Shedeur to an NFL level as a passer. The offense is tailored to be pass-first to maximize Shedeur's output, sometimes to the detriment of itself considering the predictability factor. Everything Coach Prime has done has been with an eye toward getting his sons and Travis Hunter to the pros. This unnamed coach recognized a lot of obvious points, but good on him for going against the grain and acknowledging Shedeur's talents. It feels like pulling teeth getting the media to say anything good about anyone from the Sanders family. Colorado football QB Shedeur Sanders' draft stock will be affected by Buff's overall record. Pat Mahomes didn't get dinged when his Texas Tech Red Raiders went 13-19 under his leadership, but Sanders probably will if the Buffs don't win at least 6 games. Some NFL scouts will be hunting for excuses not to bring on the media circus Coach Prime's youngest son will be, and team record is an easy one to penalize him for, even if it isn't fully on him. Robert Livingston's defense should be improved, especially from a pass coverage perspective, but the Big 12 is filled with gunslinging offenses. It'll be an uphill battle for that side of the ball just as much as Shedeur playing behind a brand new offensive line group. Deion Sanders may have proved Dan Lanning's Colorado football plays for clicks narrative correct. As Ducks Digest's Lyndon Heil pointed out, Deion Sanders may have accidentally proven Oregon head coach Dan Lanning's narrative that Colorado football plays for clicks correct by claiming that this is really what I do during an appearance on the Full Send podcast. Supporters of the Ducks will be happy to see that Sanders fed into this exact point in his own words and may resent not being able to play Colorado again as the two schools diverge into the Big 10 Conference and Big 12 Conference, respectively, Heil said. Sanders refuted Lanning's point on May 9 while speaking to the Nelk Boys. Did you hear any other speech that he made during the whole season? Asked Sanders, who is playing for the Click. This is really what I do. Lanning called out Colorado ahead of what would turn out to be a 42-6 rout at Autzen Stadium on September 23 with his infamous play for clicks speech. The Cinderella story is over, man. They're fighting for clicks, we're fighting for wins, Lanning said. There's a difference, right? There's a difference. This game ain't going to be played in Hollywood. It's going to be played on the grass, right? It's going to be played on the grass. Deion Sanders giving too much material for Colorado football haters. Sanders rarely shows humility in interviews, and after a 4-8 season, it's already come back to bite him. Continuing to take shots at Lanning serves no purpose with CU and Oregon no longer in conference rivals, but he's still chirping at the Ducks. Coach Prime has his brand, and it's not easy for everyone to understand, but you'd think he'd take a step back and acknowledge where he stands at some point. By continuing not to, he's feeding the haters bulletin board material to refer back to when the Buffs falter. Does that matter to him? Clearly not. He has his money, his NFL legacy is intact, and he's not going to be fired by the University of Colorado outside of a major scandal. And it's arguable that it even matters in the grand scheme to add Rick George. But his players may not be ready to take on the mental burden Sanders' words is creating for the entire team. Colorado football HC Deion Sanders updates his stance on nil. Colorado football head coach Deion Sanders has an updated stance on nil that he shared on the May 9th edition of the Full Send podcast. After previously claiming that Colorado is not an ATM, Sanders proclaimed that he wants to see his players earn more nil money than anything. "I want my team to get everything they've got coming to them," Sanders said. "I want those kids to blow up and be the dogs. I want them to earn more nil money than anything, and I want them to be it." That is quite the difference from his previous view that players shouldn't go to Boulder if their plan is not to get a degree or go to the NFL. "We're not an ATM. That's not going to happen here," Sanders told on November 21st. "If you come to Colorado to play football for me and the Colorado Buffaloes, it's because you really want to play football and receive a wonderful education. All the business stuff will be handled on the back end. But we are not an ATM. You're not coming here to get rich unless you're really coming here with the plan to go to the NFL and get your degree. Not to come here and be moneybag yo. That's a rapper, right?" Colorado football head coach Deion Sanders' ATM comments proved to be lip service. Post-game CEO and co-founder Bill Jula called this exact scenario coming to fruition when I spoke to him back in January. Jula said that Sanders' comments in November were likely lip service, and now, given his stance change, they seem to be exactly that. The change in opinion is a good one for the Buffs, though. While ideally Sanders wants to find players who will buy into his program from a culture standpoint, there are millions of dollars in pay-to-play nil out there that recruits will pursue. CU has to play ball with nil. Sanders seems to understand that and is adjusting his messaging accordingly. Colorado football QB Shedeur Sanders, dissed by ex-Pac-12 coach, wasn't as good as Penix, Caleb, and Nix. One Pac-12 head coach believes Colorado football QB Shedeur Sanders is better than he expected but made a point to say he's not as good as 3 top 12 NFL draft picks at his position. No. 1 pick Caleb Williams, no. 8 pick Michael Penix, and no. 12 pick Bo Nix. "I was more impressed with Shedeur than I thought I was going to be," said a former Pac-12 head coach. "But I didn't think he was as good as some of the other quarterbacks we saw, like Penix and Caleb and Nix. But I will say, it was hard to tell with how much pressure he was under. He got pummeled. That was as hard as it gets, but if they can keep him upright, he can make plays and extend plays. I do think Williams was the undisputed top QB in college football, and Shedeur and Deion Sanders have both conceded that the USC star was the top QB in his draft class. He's the only name listed who has a definitive case to be seen as better than Shedeur. Colorado football QB Shedeur Sanders probably behind Bo Nix but is definitely better than Michael Penix Jr. Nix was so good at Oregon that it's hard not to give him the edge over Shedeur. But Penix's TD-INT ratio was worse and his collegiate career was riddled with injuries. Penix being a superior QB to Shedeur is not a guarantee by any means, and may just be a straight-up misnomer designed to downplay Sanders as a top NFL draft pick in 2025. Colorado football promotes intense positional battles in locker room. One thing Coach Prime inspires in his locker room is positional competition. Players going at each other's throats is promoted to bring out the best in everyone and crown a true top dog at each position. From the outside looking in, it can appear off-putting to say the least. But football locker rooms across the country operate in a similar manner, whether or not it's to promote the safest behaviors from a physical standpoint. Until Colorado sees results on the field, it will be seen as a negative. And if the positive results never come, it'll be seen as the negative that sunk the ship from the start. Called and Shedeur's beef is just the tip of the iceberg of the Buffs locker room drama.